The cameras weren't ready for her. They gathered at the private runway for a royal delegation, not a woman the world once overlooked. Yet when the door of the 700 millions jet opened, silence swept through the crowd. Not fear, not confusion, something sharper, something that told every viewer, every guest, every investor that the night had already shifted. Sharon Alden stepped out first, calm, steady, unhurried. A black gown hugged her frame with quiet elegance. Her steps held no rush, no plea for attention. She walked as if she had nothing to prove because she didn't. 2 children stepped beside her, a girl with bright eyes, a boy with the same quiet confidence as the woman guiding him. The microphones clicked. A soft wave of whispers moved across the runway. Is that her? Why that jet? Those kids, do they look like? Sharon didn't flinch. She placed one hand on her daughter's shoulder. Her son reached for her other hand. She kept her eyes forward, steady in a way that forced everyone watching to adjust their view of her. Inside the gala hall, the atmosphere tightened. Luxury dripped from every corner, but nothing drew as much attention as the woman who had just arrived. Kalen Dravos stood near the entrance, greeting investors with the confidence of a man who had never learned to question himself. He turned at the sound of the whispers. His posture stiffened. His breath hitched. He saw her. He saw the twins. He didn't blink. For a moment, the room felt suspended. Every guest watched him, not out of support but curiosity. They wanted to know how a man known for control would react to something he never prepared for. He took one step forward, then another, but Sharon stayed still, her children close beside her, calm in a way that told a deeper truth. She didn't come for him. She came for closure. Welcome to Mr. Austin's Love Stories. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. If you're returning, thank you for staying with stories that touch the heart. Before we continue, take a moment. Hit the subscribe button. It helps this community grow and keeps these stories alive. Now, stay with me as we answer one question. How did a quiet woman, once dismissed and overlooked, arrive at her ex's gala in a jet worth $700 million? With the twins he never knew? The doors to the hall opened without warning. Guests turned at the shift in sound, expecting security or staff. Instead, they saw a woman walking with 2 children, each step measured, each breath steady. Sharon didn't hurry. She didn't look left or right. Her movement alone reshaped the room. Conversations stopped, glasses lowered. Investors followed her with their eyes, unsure how to process the sight of the woman they believed was long gone. Her daughter held her hand with quiet trust. Her son kept close, alert but calm. Together, they formed a presence no announcement could match. Kalen stood near the stage. He was used to controlling attention. He was used to commanding rooms. He wasn't used to losing his breath at the sight of one woman. But he did. His eyes locked on the twins first. The resemblance was clear. His confidence broke in a single instant, replaced by something raw. He tried to move toward them, but his steps slowed. It was as if the truth held him in place. Murmurs grew around him. They look like him. Did she arrive on that jet? Sharon didn't respond to the whispers. She didn't need to. Her entrance answered questions the world didn't even know it had. Kalen took a deeper breath, fighting the shock rising in his chest. His polished charm slipped. His practiced smile faded. For once, power didn't protect him from consequence. The twins stayed near Sharon, sensing the eyes on them. Mira lifted her chin with a quiet strength she learned from her mother. Solon stayed close, observing the room with the cautious awareness of a child who understood more than people assumed. Sharon glanced around only once, not to find approval, not to search for sympathy, but to acknowledge that every pair of eyes now saw her truth, a truth she carried alone for years, a truth standing beside her now. This was the moment the night changed. Not because she walked in with a headline, but because she walked in without fear. The whispers spread fast, not loud, not chaotic, soft enough to feel controlled, yet strong enough to reach every corner of the hall. Guests weren't staring at Sharon because she arrived. They stared because she returned, and she didn't return alone. A group near the orchestra paused mid-conversation. That's her. She looks different. No, she looks sure. Another cluster closer to the stage leaned in. Those kids, they look like, they do. Does he know? Questions moved faster than answers. Sharon didn't shift her posture. She didn't tighten her grip on the twins' hands. She moved with the same calm she lived by, even while every face around her tried to fit her return into their own expectations. Kalen felt the pressure in ways he couldn't mask. He'd handled boardrooms filled with billion-dollar decisions. He'd faced hostile investors without blinking. Yet the sight of Saren standing before him brought a reaction he couldn't control. He saw her dress. He saw the twins' matching eyes. He saw the quiet steadiness he once relied on. His heartbeat changed. He stepped forward again, but hesitation slowed him. It wasn't uncertainty about who the children were. Deep down, he knew. The truth settled into him with a weight that knocked out every excuse he ever prepared. The investors behind him shifted, watching his face closely. He gave no speech, no greeting, no charm. For the first time in years, he didn't have a script. Saren simply met his gaze. Not cold, not harsh, clear. She didn't hide the life she built without him. She didn't apologize for it either. Her twins moved closer to her. Mira's fingers tightened around her mother's hand. Solon looked at Kalen with quiet uncertainty, waiting for a clue about who this stranger was to him. Kalen's chest tightened at the realization. They didn't know him. They weren't waiting for him. They weren't looking for him. They weren't reaching out to him. He wasn't part of their story. Not then. Not now. And the room saw it. Every guest, every investor, every person who once watched him rise saw something crack in his expression. They weren't watching a powerful man. They were watching a man confronted by the life he once walked away from. Saren held her place at the center of the hall, her twins close, her composure steady. She didn't need the crowd's approval. She didn't need Kalen's reaction to guide her. The moment belonged to her because she owned her story now. Guests whispered. Investors exchanged quiet looks. Kalen froze in front of the life he never slowed down enough to understand. But Saren didn't waver. This wasn't the timid young woman who once waited for replies that never came. This was a mother who learned strength the hard way and carried it with ease. A woman who built a peaceful life. A woman who stopped asking for space and created her own. Tonight, she didn't return to revive the past. She returned to show that she grew beyond it. Welcome to Mr. Austin's Love Stories. To every new viewer joining us, thank you for being here. To those returning, thank you for supporting stories that carry heart, meaning, and lessons we hold on to long after the video ends. Take a moment and subscribe. This channel grows through you. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your engagement brings them to more people who need these lessons as much as we do. Now, let's step into this journey together. Because what you saw a moment ago, the woman stepping off a jet worth $700 million with 2 children who carry her strength in her past, is only the beginning. A moment like that doesn't happen by accident. There is a story behind her calm. A story behind those children. A story behind the man who froze when he saw them. And there is a reason Saren Alden walked into that gala without fear. Stay with me. We're about to go back to where everything began. All eyes stayed on Saren. Some watched with confusion, some with quiet respect, a few with fear for what this meant for Kalen's image. But Saren wasn't thinking about any of them. Her focus stayed on the 2 children who trusted her completely. Children who held no bitterness. Children who knew love, not loss. They stood there, unaware of the storm their presence stirred in a room filled with money, status, and pride. Kalen tried to speak. His lips parted, but no words landed. His composure slipped, something rare for a man trained to mask every slip. The board members behind him kept still, waiting for his reaction, unsure if stepping forward would make this worse. Saren didn't give him the chance. Not with anger, not with accusations, just quiet certainty. A certainty that told him, "You no longer decide the pace of my life." The music softened. Guests watched. The air tightened with unspoken truth. But this moment didn't begin tonight. It began years ago, before the spotlight, before the silence, before the choices that set 2 lives on different paths. You've seen the result. Now, let's uncover the journey. Stay with me. This story holds lessons about dignity, timing, loss, growth, and love that moves at the right pace, not the loudest one. If you're ready to know how Saren Alden reached this point, how she went from overlooked to unforgettable, let's step back. Back to the day her life crossed paths with a man who didn't understand the cost of her silence. Saren Alden moved through life with the kind of steadiness people often misunderstood. She didn't speak to fill silence. She didn't respond to pressure. She didn't chase moments that weren't meant for her. Her strength came from choosing her pace and honoring it. Even as a child, she learned to steady herself before reacting. Her mother used to say, "A clear mind wins battles a loud voice never will." Those words shaped her. In her 20s, while others rushed for quick success, Saren built her life one thoughtful step at a time. She worked long hours in accounting, not because she wanted fame or applause, but because she valued precision. Every task she touched carried her quiet signature, complete focus, complete honesty. Her coworkers trusted her because she never pretended to be more than she was. She also never pretended to be less. People often overlooked her at first glance. They didn't see the strength beneath her gentle tone or the resolve behind her soft eyes. They assumed she moved slowly because she lacked ambition, but those who watched her closely learned the truth. Saren didn't fear action. She feared moving without purpose. When she committed to something, she did so fully. Her calm wasn't passive. It was earned. Her strength wasn't loud. It was lived. She made choices with intention. She didn't push her way into circles that didn't value her. She didn't follow trends for approval. She held her boundaries with a quiet firmness that left an impression long after she walked away. People didn't always understand her, but they respected her. This foundation, this steady, patient core, became the anchor of her story. It shaped how she loved, how she walked through pain, how she raised her children, and how she confronted the past she never asked to revisit. Long before the jet, long before the gala, long before the man who would change her path, Saren stood in her own truth. Her life didn't rise through noise. It rose through certainty, and that certainty would one day shock a room full of the world's most powerful people. Saren lived in a modest apartment on the quiet side of the city. It wasn't grand, but it held warmth. The walls carried soft colors. The shelves held books she'd read countless times. The kitchen held the scent of meals she made with care at the end of long days. Her happiness didn't depend on expensive things. She found comfort in routine, in small joys, in the life she built with discipline. Her mornings began with quiet reflection. She sat by the window before work, letting the early light settle her thoughts. While others scrolled through news or rushed to beat traffic, Saren chose calm. She brewed her tea, opened her planner, and approached the day with order. This rhythm gave her balance. This balance gave her strength. At work, her desk stayed organized. Her reports stayed accurate. She didn't compete for attention. She didn't chase positions she didn't want. Her worth didn't come from titles. It came from doing her job well and treating people with fairness. Her coworkers admired her consistency. She wasn't the kind to gossip or brag. She simply showed up, delivered excellence, and helped when she was needed. Her evenings were simple. A book, a warm meal, a call from her closest friend. Saren believed stability was a gift, not something to overlook. She valued peace because she knew the world rarely offered it for free. When chaos rose, she didn't panic. She breathed. She assessed. She chose her response. This humble routine shaped her into a woman who didn't crave luxury or crowds. Her heart found fulfillment in meaning, not attention. She didn't envy people who lived in penthouses or traveled the world. She didn't measure worth by wealth or status. She measured it by kindness, integrity, and the quiet joy of choosing her own path. Her life remained steady because she built it that way. And one day, this steady foundation would allow her to stand tall in spaces meant to intimidate her. The gala lights, the whispers, the cameras. None of them could shake a woman who found contentment without them. Saren never made choices in hurry. Patience guided her, not because she feared mistakes, but because she respected timing. She believed in thinking before speaking, listening before reacting, and understanding before deciding. Her calm choices came from years of observing how rushed decisions created unnecessary pain. When faced with conflict, she didn't respond with impulse. She paused. She listened. She weighed her options. Those around her sometimes mistook her patience for passivity, but Saren knew better. The decisions she made with care lasted. The ones she rushed never did. Her life proved that waiting wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Her approach to relationships followed the same principle. She didn't rush into friendships. She valued sincerity. She didn't let people close unless their energy aligned with peace and purpose. Her inner circle stayed small by design. She didn't need a crowd. She needed authenticity. And when she loved with steadiness, not intense flames that burned out, but consistent warmth that lasted. This patience shaped how she approached goals. She didn't push herself into burnout. She didn't measure success by how fast she reached milestones. She cared more about building a stable future than achieving flashy victories. Her measured steps allowed her to grow without losing herself. She protected her peace because she knew peace didn't return once broken. When life tested her, her patience kept her grounded. When love tested her, her patience allowed her to see truth clearly. And when she eventually walked into the gala, patience became her power. A rushed woman might have sought revenge. Saren sought clarity. A hurried heart might have chased validation. Saren walked with dignity instead. Her decisions shaped her life in ways the world couldn't predict. They guided her through heartbreak, through motherhood, through new beginnings. They prepared her for the moment she stood in front of the man who once saw her as optional. Patience didn't slow her down. It prepared her to rise. And rise she did. Before their paths crossed, Saren already knew who Kalen Dravos was in the public eye. News outlets called him a rising star. Investors described him as sharp and unstoppable. His name carried influence in places she never planned to enter. People admired him for his pace, his ambition, his results. They saw the polished image he worked hard to maintain. Saren saw something else. She saw the fatigue behind his smile during late meetings. She saw the soft desperation in his eyes when he discussed pressure from his board. She heard the strain in his voice when he tried to balance expectations with honesty. She noticed the way his shoulders relaxed only when he stepped away from the spotlight. Most people saw power. Saren saw the weight that power placed on him. She never chased his attention. That's what drew him in. While others competed for a moment with him, she treated him like a person, not a trophy. She didn't flatter him. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't adjust her pace to match his. Instead, she forced him to slow down if he wanted to understand her world. That shift grounded him. Kalen admired her quiet insight. She offered truth where others offered praise. She offered calm where others offered excitement. She offered depth where others offered charm. Her presence allowed him to speak without performing. She noticed the parts of him he hid, not because they were flaws, but because the world didn't want honesty from men like him. She saw who he could be, not just who he appeared to be. And for a while, that connection brought balance to his life. But while she saw him clearly, he didn't realize how much he needed that clarity until it was gone. When his world demanded speed, he abandoned the one person who taught him to breathe. And by the time he understood the loss, Saren had already chosen peace. Saren's life before everything happened set the stage for the contrast the world later witnessed. Before the jet, before the gala, before the stairs, Saren lived as a woman who valued simplicity and truth. Her sense of identity didn't rely on luxury or attention. It relied on purpose. Her wardrobe held simple pieces. Her meals were home-cooked. Her goals focused on building a stable future, not chasing status. She found joy in quiet evenings, heartfelt conversations, and meaningful work. She didn't seek loud excitement. She sought stability, growth, and kindness. Her values became the foundation for how she loved and how she endured heartbreak. When Kalen drifted away, her world didn't crumble. It hurt, but it didn't destroy her. She relied on the same principles she always lived by: patience, dignity, and clarity. She didn't react with anger. She didn't compete for his attention. She stepped back because she valued her peace more than proximity to power. This baseline made her later transformation even more striking. When she arrived at the gala, dressed in elegance, stepping off a jet worth more than most people could fathom, the world saw the glow of success. But her glow didn't come from wealth. It came from growth. The contrast was powerful. A humble woman walking into a world that once dismissed her. A quiet presence disrupting a room built on status. A mother who rebuilt her life without rushing or forcing anything. This beginning reminds us that strength doesn't need spotlight. It grows in quiet places. It grows through honest choices. It grows long before the world notices. Saren didn't rise overnight. She rose through patience, and that patience became the force that changed everything. Kalen Dravos grew up in a world built long before he took his first steps. His family name carried weight across global markets, and every major investment firm knew the Dravos influence. Kalen didn't inherit freedom. He inherited expectations. By the time he was 12, he attended leadership camps. By 16, he shadowed executives. By 21, he presented financial strategies to board members twice his age. He never felt young. He felt prepared. People treated him as the future of the empire. They praised his intelligence, counted on his instincts, and scrutinized every move he made. His father rarely offered compliments, but when he did, they weren't personal. They were assessments of performance. You handled that meeting well. Your projections hit the mark. The board trusts you. These weren't words of affection. They were reminders that his value came from results. Kalen learned to measure himself through achievement. If he wasn't producing, he wasn't enough. His mind never rested because the world around him didn't allow rest. He lived between flights, conferences, and strategy sessions. People called him gifted, driven, unstoppable. They admired his speed, his efficiency, his sharpness. But no one noticed when his shoulders tightened during long nights, or when he hesitated before decisions that carried too much weight. Privately, he struggled with silence. The quiet moments reminded him of everything he hadn't figured out. He didn't know how to slow down. He didn't know how to separate his identity from the empire. Most of all, he didn't know what genuine peace felt like. His life was built on forward momentum. Kalen wasn't raised to feel. He was raised to perform, and that upbringing shaped every decision he made, every connection, every relationship. His world respected speed and discipline, not softness or vulnerability. People followed him because they believed he knew exactly who he was. But deep down, he didn't know what he needed. He only knew what he was expected to deliver. This upbringing created the man who would one day meet Saren Alden, the one person who would challenge everything he thought he understood. As Kalen stepped deeper into the business world, the pressure intensified. He became the youngest executive in Davos international history. Headlines praised him. Investors trusted him. Yet none of that left room for error. Every misstep risked board confidence. Every hesitation risked shareholder trust. His schedule ran without pause, filled with calls that stretched across time zones and meetings that consumed entire days. The closer he got to power, the more chained he felt. He slept with his phone beside him, waiting for updates. He skipped meals to address urgent concerns. He learned to ignore exhaustion. His assistants rotated yearly, unable to keep up with his pace. People envied his lifestyle, unaware of the toll it took on him. They saw luxury. He felt pressure. They saw success. He felt surveillance. He lived under the constant awareness that one mistake could shift the board's perception. At family gatherings, conversations revolved around company performance, not personal well-being. His father demanded strategic clarity at all times. His mother, though kinder, still measured his worth through the empire's lens. Kalen never heard, "Are you happy?" He only heard, "Are you ready?" He built walls around himself to survive. He learned to present confidence even when unsure. He learned to give orders even when overwhelmed. Vulnerability became a risk he never took. And yet, beneath the layers of composure, he carried a quiet longing, something he never voiced aloud. He wanted stillness. Just a moment where no one expected anything from him. That yearning grew each year. It grew during press interviews when he rehearsed lines he didn't believe. It grew during investor dinners where false praise felt heavy. It grew each time his father compared him to board legends, pushing him into a mold he didn't choose. On the outside, he looked unstoppable. Inside, he was running without direction. This internal battle shaped his temperament. It made him efficient but impatient, strategic but emotionally guarded, brilliant but unreachable. And it set the stage for a collision between his pace and Saren's steadiness. Kalen first noticed Saren Alden at a leadership conference that blurred into his packed schedule. She sat at the end of a long table, reviewing financial sheets with measured attention. She didn't rush. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance around the room seeking approval. Her calm contrasted sharply with the frantic energy he carried. He watched her from a distance at first, not because she demanded attention, because she didn't. She handled problems quietly, solving issues without creating noise. While others pitched themselves loudly, Saren let her work speak. Her stillness unsettled him in the best way. It slowed his thoughts. It challenged the pace he lived by. Their first conversation wasn't dramatic. It was simple. She corrected a data discrepancy he missed. No praise, no hesitation. She offered truth without bending to his title. Kalen wasn't used to truth. He was used to flattery. Her steadiness drew him in. She didn't chase him or try to impress him. She treated him like a person, not an opportunity. That difference struck him deeply. When he approached her during breaks, she didn't act intimidated or eager. She listened. She observed. She gave insightful responses without forcing conversation. For a man constantly surrounded by ambition and noise, Saren became a quiet space he didn't know he needed. Her patience softened him. Her presence steadied him. He found himself slowing down to match her rhythm, something he never did for anyone else. He admired the way she thought before speaking. He admired the sincerity in her eyes. He admired how she moved with intention, not haste. Her life wasn't shaped by pressure, it was shaped by meaning, and that difference showed him a reflection of the life he secretly wished for. Saren didn't see his money or status. She saw a man trying to breathe beneath the weight of an empire. That recognition formed the early thread between them, a thread strong enough to pull him into a romance he never expected. Their relationship grew away from cameras and headlines. Kaylin chose private restaurants, quiet walks, and late-night conversations where he didn't have to perform. Saren didn't ask for luxury. She asked for honesty. For the first time in years, he spoke about the pressure he carried, the expectations. That suffocated him, and the fear of disappointing the empire he inherited. Saren listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer solutions. She offered presence. That presence changed him. It gave him moments of stillness he never experienced before. Her calm softened his edges. Her patience slowed his thoughts. She helped him see decisions clearly, not through fear or urgency, but through intention. Kaylin found himself relying on her more than he admitted. She grounded him during stressful weeks. She reminded him to breathe. When pressure mounted, she helped him make choices based on values instead of fear of failure. Their romance became his refuge. But Saren changed through it too. Loving Kaylin challenged her comfort zone. She learned to step into rooms she once avoided. She learned that her voice held weight even around people who intimidated her. She gained confidence by seeing herself through his eyes. For a while, their strengths balanced each other. He brought ambition. She brought grounding. Together, they created harmony neither expected. But beneath the harmony was a silent tension. He lived fast. She lived steady. He needed immediate solutions. She needed thoughtful steps. They loved each other, but their paces moved in opposite directions, hinting at the fracture that would eventually break them. Still, in those early days, love flowed freely, unhurried, warm, and genuine. They didn't know their differences would one day demand choices neither felt ready to make. Their connection deepened with time, but so did the signs that their worlds weren't built the same way. Saren valued slow, meaningful progress. Kaylin valued swift execution. They cared for each other, yet their lives pulled them in different directions. When they planned outings, she liked quiet spaces. He leaned toward upscale events. When they discussed decisions, she preferred reflection. He preferred action. When she embraced simplicity, he expected polish. Their differences weren't faults, they were contrasts. But contrasts, when left unchecked, create distance. Kaylin tried to match her slow pace, but his world never allowed it. Conference calls disrupted their dinners. Investor demands stole weekends. Emergency meetings replaced planned moments. He didn't mean to choose work over her. He simply didn't see another way. Every day brought new expectations, and he chased them out of fear of losing his status. Saren understood pressure, but she didn't understand the increasingly cold moments that followed. He grew distracted, short, tense. He stopped hearing her concerns. He stopped noticing her quiet attempts to support him. The more he ran, the more she stood still, unsure how to reach a man who lived like a storm. Yet even as tension grew, love remained. They still shared soft moments. They still reached for each other during quiet nights. They still believed in the bond they built. But bonds require balance, and their balance was slipping. Kaylin didn't notice how his speed bruised Saren's heart. Saren didn't realize her stillness sometimes made him feel unseen. Their emotional rhythms clashed in ways neither expected. Love existed between them, strong and honest, but pace differences whispered warnings neither listened to. Their story wasn't doomed. It was mismatched. And mismatched love, when pushed by pressure and pride, often breaks in ways that echo for years. This was the beginning of the fracture, small at first, silent at first, but strong enough to alter both their futures. Kaylin's rise within Dravos International came with a cost he didn't foresee. As the company expanded, the board grew restless. They wanted more visibility, more impact, more headlines to boost investor confidence. To them, Kaylin wasn't only an executive, he was a brand. And brands needed spotlight. They needed interviews, public appearances, strategic events, and polished images that spoke louder than quarterly reports. In board meetings, conversations shifted. Your numbers are strong, Kaylin, but your presence is lacking. We need you on magazine covers. You must embody the company. His achievements weren't enough anymore. He had to become a symbol. The pressure tightened quickly. The board sent him schedules packed with interviews, dinners, charity events, and appearances. They told him this was necessary for the company's growth. They insisted potential partners needed confidence not only in the business, but in the face leading it. Though he tried to push back, they dismissed his concerns with polite words that felt like commands. Kaylin's days shifted from strategy to performance. His phone buzzed constantly. His evenings filled with rehearsals for speeches he didn't want to deliver. The board praised his numbers, but criticized his low public visibility. Their demands grew louder, and he became more guarded, more distant, more consumed by tasks that never allowed him to breathe. Saren felt the change before he did. Their dinners grew shorter. Their conversations felt rushed. He arrived late and left early. The calm he once found in her presence became something he no longer had time to embrace. Saren watched the shift with concern, not judgment. She saw him getting buried under expectations he never asked for, but she also knew she couldn't pull him out of a life he believed he had to protect. The board's push for public appeal wasn't aimed at Kaylin's happiness. It was aimed at profit. He became a vessel for their ambitions. And while he carried that weight silently, it began to press into the parts of his life he once treasured. This was the beginning of his emotional distance. A slow shift, subtle at first, but strong enough to shake their foundation. As the board placed heavier demands on him, something inside Kaylin changed. His plate was full, but instead of admitting overwhelm, he responded with shorter sentences, tighter tones, and a growing impatience that touched even the moments meant for peace. Meetings drained him. Appearances exhausted him. The constant need to impress investors built a pressure he no longer controlled. Saren noticed because she always did. When she asked how his day went, his answers shrank from detailed reflections to flat phrases. Busy. Long. No time. He didn't mean to shut her out, but he forgot to let her in. He didn't see how his tone cut deeper with each passing week. Every time he replied without looking up, Saren felt the distance widen. Every forgotten plan felt heavier. Every unanswered message carried weight. There was a night she prepared dinner, hoping to give him a quiet moment away from the world. She set the table softly, lit a warm light, and waited. When he called to cancel, his tone held no apology. Something came up. We'll talk later. He hung up before she could respond. She ate alone, not with anger, with understanding and sadness. She knew he faced immense pressure, but she also knew that love required attention, not excuses. She didn't need grand gestures. She needed presence, and his presence was fading. Her quiet heart noticed every missed moment, every rushed goodbye, every distracted conversation. She didn't confront him because she didn't want to add weight to his stress. She hoped he would slow down on his own. She hoped he would remember the pace that once held them together. But hope doesn't change exhaustion, and exhaustion doesn't nourish love. Kaylin's replies weren't only short. They were signs of a man slipping from himself. And Saren, patient as she was, felt the shift more deeply with each passing day. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It happened on an ordinary evening, after an ordinary request. Saren had called to ask if he wanted to rest instead of attending a press event. She knew he was tired. She could hear it in the strain of his breathing. She wanted him to pause, even if only for one night. Kaylin, you've been pushing so hard. Maybe give yourself a break, she suggested softly. He misunderstood her tone. He heard concern as criticism. He heard care as pressure. Saren, not everything can wait, he snapped. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried sharp edges. You don't understand what's at stake. Stop telling me to slow down. The silence after his words stretched longer than either expected. Saren didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She let the silence settle because she knew reacting in emotion would only deepen the wound. But the quiet hurt. It pressed into her chest in ways she never voiced. She'd never asked him to abandon his responsibilities. She simply wanted him to protect his well-being. When he realized he'd snapped, guilt flickered across his face, but he didn't apologize. He brushed it off, choosing to move forward instead of repairing the moment. But Saren couldn't move past it as easily. not because of the tone itself, but because of what it revealed. Kaylin saw her calm as interruption. He saw her care as interference. He saw her voice as an obstacle at a time when he felt overwhelmed. For a woman who built her life on patience, that moment cut deeply. She stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of reflection. She watched him rush back into his schedule, unaware of the small fracture he'd left behind. Fractures rarely begin with large breaks. They begin with sharp words spoken at the wrong time. That night, Saren understood something heavy. If the world kept pushing Kaylin, and he didn't slow down, their love would lose space to breathe. And she would lose the man she believed she truly knew. A few weeks later, the board pushed Kaylin further than Saren expected. During a closed meeting, one of the members made a remark he hadn't prepared for. "Kaylin, we need you to align your image with market expectations. We'd like you to consider being seen with someone who complements the brand visually, someone media-friendly, someone more photogenic." He didn't challenge them. He didn't defend the woman who gave him peace. He didn't question the insult hidden behind their suggestion. He simply nodded. That decision marked a turning point he didn't recognize at first. The man who once valued authenticity accepted a request that dismissed the woman who gave him real stability. Saren didn't hear it from him. She overheard it days later while passing outside a meeting room. The words hit her harder than the snapped moment. She didn't cry. She didn't confront him. She didn't plead for him to choose her. She walked away with quiet devastation, carrying her heartbreak in stillness, the same stillness that once brought him comfort. Kaylin tried to reach her later that evening, unaware she already knew the truth. He spoke about the board's demands as if they were routine. He casually mentioned needing to attend events with someone aligned with investor expectations, calling it temporary. Temporary or not, the message was clear. Her presence no longer fit the image he needed to project. Her quiet strength didn't photograph well. Her love didn't add market value. Saren listened calmly, gripping her hands behind her back to steady her breath. She didn't argue. She didn't make a case for herself. She simply accepted what his silence had already answered. The heartbreak didn't explode. It settled. Quiet. Heavy. Final. Moments like these are why many viewers relate to stories like this. If you've ever been overlooked by someone who claimed to care, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Saren's love remained genuine, but she knew she couldn't stay where she wasn't protected, and that understanding would lead her toward the next chapter of her life. Saren learned she was pregnant on a quiet afternoon, weeks after the board pushed Kaylin into the spotlight. She hadn't been feeling well, but she dismissed it at first, thinking the stress of their shifting relationship was wearing on her. When the test revealed the truth, she sat on the edge of her bed, stunned. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from a wave of emotion she couldn't name right away. She whispered one thing to herself: "Life is growing." The meaning of those words settled over her like warm light. Her heart shifted instantly, expanding with a love she hadn't yet met face to face. She thought about the nights she and Kaylin shared soft laughter, the times he held her when exhaustion crept in, the moments he let his guard down. A part of her believed this child, this new life, might bring him back to the man he once was, the man she loved. But another part of her knew the truth. His world was moving too fast to notice anything outside of it. Still, she tried to think carefully. She knew this wasn't a decision to make lightly. Motherhood meant responsibility, stability, protection. She placed her hands gently over her stomach, her breath steadying. The moment felt sacred. She didn't see pregnancy as a burden. She saw it as a calling. She knew she would give her all to this child, heart, strength, and every ounce of patience she possessed. She thought about Kaylin and wondered how he would receive the news. Would it slow him down long enough to see what they were losing? Would he feel joy? Fear? Relief? She didn't know, but she hoped he would meet the moment with honesty. That night, she lay awake, thinking about the life forming inside her. The world around her had begun moving in directions she didn't fully understand, but her center remained calm. The knowledge of her pregnancy grounded her. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was grasping for pieces of a fading relationship. She had something real, something stable, something growing with purpose. This was her turning point. The beginning of a journey she had no intention of surrendering to anyone's expectations but her own. Saren knew she had to tell Kaylin. She didn't want secrets between them. She believed he deserved to know, even if the timing felt fragile. Her first attempt came late in the evening after one of his long board meetings. She waited patiently outside his office, hands folded, hope steady. When his assistant finally waved her in, she watched him rush from call to call, barely acknowledging her presence. "I need to talk to you," she said gently, clearing her throat. "Later," he answered, eyes glued to his screen. "I'm dealing with something urgent." She waited 20 minutes. Then 30. When he finally ended the call, he glanced up with strained eyes. "What is it, Saren?" "I'm under pressure," he said, already reaching for another report. The moment slipped away. She left without speaking. Her second attempt came 3 days later at a company event. Cameras lined the hallway. Reporters shouted his name. Kalen's posture was rigid, controlled. He barely noticed her until she stepped forward and softly called his name. "I have something important to tell you," she whispered. He forced a tight smile, mindful of the crowd. "Not now. After the quarter ends," he said, touching her arm briefly before walking away. She stood in that hallway while cameras flashed behind her. He didn't look back. He didn't ask if she was all right. He didn't give her space to speak. He moved toward the spotlight, leaving her words trapped beneath her ribs. Each failed attempt cut deeper. She wasn't asking for time he didn't have. She was asking for the chance to share life-changing news. But to him, anything that didn't serve his current goals became an interruption. Saren understood pressure, but she didn't understand the growing dismissal. It wasn't the loud kind. It was a quiet erasure, one that told her she was no longer part of the future he was shaping. Still, she carried the truth with patience. She believed in timing. She believed in clarity. She believed in trying. But trying has limits, and his silence pushed her closer to a choice she never imagined making. Kalen didn't intend to hurt her. He was drowning in expectations, but intentions don't erase impact, and the impact of his dismissiveness left a mark Saren couldn't ignore. It showed in the way he answered her calls with clipped tones. It showed in the way he forgot plans they'd made. It showed in the nights he canceled without apology. His world grew louder. His attention grew narrower, and Saren became peripheral. She watched him move through life with the speed of a man who had forgotten softness. When she entered a room, his eyes landed on her for seconds, then drifted to his phone. When she spoke, he listened halfway, mind already racing through tasks. When she reached for connection, he gave her fragments. The love they once shared, steady, warm, grounded, began thinning under the weight of expectations he let control him. Saren didn't need him to be perfect. She didn't need him to abandon his responsibilities. She needed him to pause, even briefly, to acknowledge her, to hear her, to see her. But he couldn't, or wouldn't. His dismissiveness wasn't a single act. It was a pattern of forgetting her importance, of overlooking her voice, of valuing image over intimacy. The worst moment came when she finally gathered the courage to call late one evening. She didn't want to wait for another event or another rushed conversation. Her heart beat fast as she dialed him. "Kalen, I need to tell you something. It can't wait." He sighed loudly. "Saren, I've had a long day. Can we not do this right now?" Her throat tightened. "It's serious. So is everything I'm handling. I can't take on anything else," he replied, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "Please, let it go tonight. Let it go." She hung up with tears she refused to let fall. His tone confirmed what the board hinted all along. She didn't fit into the image his world now demanded. Not because she lacked beauty, but because she lacked complication. She didn't bring glamour. She brought peace, and peace didn't photograph well. That night, Saren understood one truth. Love cannot grow in a space where it is repeatedly pushed aside. The morning after his dismissiveness, Saren sat quietly at her kitchen table, staring at her untouched tea. She replayed their recent interactions, searching for a moment when she still felt valued. Her heart didn't ache with anger. It ached with clarity. The man she loved no longer had space for her voice, and she refused to force her way into a life where she wasn't welcomed. She placed her hand over her stomach, grounding herself in the life she carried. That simple gesture reminded her who she needed to protect first. Not him, not the relationship, herself, and the child growing inside her. Walking away wasn't dramatic. She didn't call him to end things. She didn't march into his office demanding attention. She didn't send long messages pleading for change. That wasn't her way. She chose silence, not out of defeat but out of dignity. She packed her belongings with steady hands. She gathered memories carefully. She folded the small gifts he once gave her without bitterness. She left his apartment key on the countertop, placing it gently as if releasing the last fragment of hope she carried. When she closed the door behind her, she felt a shift inside. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of self-respect. She walked down the hall with a calm expression, not allowing tears to break the resolve she built. Leaving wasn't easy, but staying would have cost her more than she was willing to lose. For days she didn't reach out. Kalen didn't notice immediately. His schedule buried him, shielding him from the consequences of his neglect. By the time he realized she was gone, she had already rebuilt her foundation, not with anger, with acceptance. Saren didn't speak poorly of him. She didn't share her pain with co-workers. She didn't expose his flaws. She simply withdrew. Her silence became the strongest statement she ever made. Walking away wasn't about punishing him. It was about protecting herself. She chose dignity over desperation, and dignity led her to a future she never expected, but deeply deserved. Saren's heartbreak didn't overshadow the promise forming in her heart. As her pregnancy progressed, she grew more certain of one truth: she would raise her children with unwavering love, even if she had to do it alone. She spoke to them often, placing her hand gently over her belly, whispering to the lives she hadn't yet met, "You will be loved, even if it's only by me." Those words weren't said in sadness. They were said in strength. She knew motherhood wouldn't be easy, but she also knew love gave her more power than pain ever could. She understood sacrifice. She understood patience. She understood building a life with intention. These values would shape her children long before they took their first breath. She envisioned the kind of home she wanted for them: warm, stable, steady, a place where they would feel secure, a place that would protect them from the chaos she once watched Kalen drown in. She wanted them to grow with confidence, not pressure, with kindness, not competition, with understanding, not neglect. The promise wasn't only emotional, it was practical. Saren reorganized her finances. She adjusted her work schedule. She built plans that prioritized her health and their future. Each step she took reflected a mother preparing her heart and home. Her love didn't come from impulse. It came from commitment. She didn't resent Kalen. She didn't wish him harm, but she no longer expected him to be part of the story. His silence shaped her decision. His dismissiveness clarified it. She accepted she couldn't raise him into the father she hoped he would be. Instead, she would raise her children into the people she knew they could become. This was the moment strength replaced longing. This was the moment dignity replaced heartbreak. This was the moment she understood that love, real love, didn't beg. It promised. It protected. It persevered. And Saren carried that promise into the years that followed, building a life so strong that even the man who once dismissed her couldn't ignore it when fate brought them face to face again. Mira and Solon entered Saren's world like soft light breaking through a dim room. They were born only minutes apart, yet their personalities emerged distinct from the start. Mira arrived with bright, curious eyes that scanned every face as if studying intentions. Even as a toddler, she examined puzzles with intense focus, moving pieces slowly until they fit perfectly. Her mind worked methodically. She didn't rush. She approached challenges with quiet determination, mirroring Saren's thoughtful nature. Solon, on the other hand, carried his strength in his hands. He loved stacking blocks, rearranging objects, and trying to understand how things worked. He often sat on the floor with small tools from a toy set, concentrating until he figured out what piece belonged where. His patience resembled Saren's, but his energy carried a spark of independence that belonged only to him. Although different, they protected each other in ways that softened Saren's heart. Mira kept her brother grounded, reminding him gently when he left toys scattered or forgot to finish a task. Solon encouraged his sister to try new activities, pulling her into games she hesitated to start. They balanced one another effortlessly. Their laughter filled the apartment daily. They created dances in the living room, built forts from blankets, and shared stories before bedtime. Saren watched them grow with pride, amazed by how much love they brought into her life. They didn't understand the complexities of the world, but they understood kindness. They understood comfort. They understood the value of a mother who always reached for them first. Saren chose not to burden them with the story of their father. She answered their questions with honesty, but not bitterness. "You have a father," she told them. "He lives far, and when the time is right, truth finds its way." The twins accepted this with innocence. They didn't crave what they never received. Instead, They clung to the home and love they knew. Their personalities shaped the rhythm of the house. Mira's thoughtful nature brought calm. Solon's curiosity brought movement. Together, they created harmony that no amount of wealth or luxury could replicate. Saren didn't need a mansion or extravagant toys to raise them. Their emotional world was rich because it was built on connection, not possessions. Saren's apartment was modest, but it carried a sense of peace money couldn't buy. Sunlight filtered through soft curtains in the morning, touching the hardwood floors with a gentle glow. The smell of fresh tea lingered in the kitchen. The living room held shelves filled with books, framed drawings from the twins and plants that Mira insisted on watering every Sunday. The apartment wasn't large, but Saren made it feel spacious with intention. Every corner served a purpose. Every item held meaning. The twins shared a room painted in warm tones, with a small desk for puzzles and a basket full of building blocks. Their beds sat near each other, close enough for late-night whispers and shared dreams. Saren wanted their home to feel like safety, stability, love. She cleaned after long shifts, cooked warm meals even when tired, and made sure laughter never ran low. The place didn't echo loneliness. It echoed presence. It echoed care. She taught the twins to greet mornings with gratitude, to treat their belongings with respect, and to understand that home wasn't measured by size, but by the hearts within it. Neighbors often commented on how peaceful her apartment felt the moment they stepped inside. No chaos, no strain, just a sense of belonging. Saren took pride in maintaining that atmosphere. She couldn't give the twins expensive vacations or high-end gadgets, but she could give them a place where they felt valued. During winter, they cuddled under blankets and read stories aloud. During spring, they planted herbs in pots on the balcony. During autumn, they lined their shoes at the door, tracking in fallen leaves they collected. Their home wasn't about luxury. It was about memories, ordinary but meaningful. In the evenings, Saren watched Mira help Solon with small tasks, guiding him with patience. She watched Solon fetch his sister's favorite book without being asked. These small acts reminded her that wealth didn't shape a child's character, love did. Their home wasn't perfect. It wasn't large. It wasn't filled with expensive things. But it was full of warmth, full of growth, full of the life Saren built with steady hands and steady heart. Risa Hale became more than a friend. She became a pillar in Saren's life. They met years earlier at work, bonding over shared values and quiet resilience. When Saren became a mother, Risa stepped into their world with open arms. She didn't offer pity. She offered support. Real, consistent support. She brought groceries when Saren worked late, placing them on the counter without making it a gesture of charity. "You'll get it back to me when you can," she always said. She braided Mira's hair in the mornings when Saren rushed for early shifts. She taught Solon how to plant herbs and care for them, filling the balcony garden with life. Risa didn't replace anything Saren lacked. She added what Saren needed: community. She understood the emotional weight of raising children alone, and she never let Saren carry it without help. When Saren felt stretched thin, Risa stepped in quietly, picking the twins up from school, helping with homework, or simply keeping them company so Saren could rest. The twins loved her deeply. Mira always saved her drawings for Aunt Risa. Solon ran to her every time she came through the door, eager to show her whatever project he was working on. Risa celebrated their birthdays, attended school events, and cheered for their milestones as if they were her own. She also understood Saren's silence about Kaylin. She never pushed for details, never judged her choices. She simply reminded her one truth: you are enough for them, more than enough. When Saren doubted herself, Risa grounded her. When Saren worried about the future, Risa reminded her of the strength she carried through life. When Saren worked extra hours, Risa kept the home running with patience and love. Her presence stitched their small family together with threads of loyalty and care. She wasn't wealthy, but her generosity enriched the twins' lives far more than money could. Mira and Solon learned kindness not from lessons, but from watching Risa live it. They learned community not from lectures, but from the way Risa showed up. Saren often whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude at night for Risa's presence. In a world where many connections faded under pressure or greed, Risa remained steady. She stood by Saren, not with noise, but with action. And that action shaped the twins into children who understood the true meaning of love. Saren's days were full, but she didn't see her responsibilities as burdens. She saw them as commitments. Every morning, she rose early to prepare breakfast, pack school lunches, and ensure the twins started their day with certainty. She ironed uniforms late at night, washed dishes after exhaustion settled in, and reviewed homework even after long work hours. Her sacrifices weren't dramatic. They were steady, quiet choices repeated each day. She skipped new clothes so the twins could have what they needed for school. She turned down outings to save money for emergencies. She carried grocery bags up the stairs, sometimes with aching arms, but never with complaint. She worked extra hours when bills piled up. She rearranged her schedule around school plays, parent meetings, and doctor appointments. Yet within these sacrifices lived small joys. Solon's laughter when she tickled him before bed. Mira's soft voice as she read stories aloud in the living room. The shared dinners filled with simple meals but warm conversations. The random hugs her children gave her without prompting. The sound of their feet running to meet her at the door. These joys gave meaning to every hard moment. They reminded Saren that love didn't grow in perfect circumstances. It grew in effort, consistency, and presence. She learned that children don't remember price tags. They remember warmth. They remember security. They remember the feeling of being loved without conditions. So Saren poured love into every gesture, from the way she tucked them in at night to the way she listened to their stories at the end of the day. Her life wasn't easy, but it was full of purpose, full of growth, full of memories that shaped the twins into compassionate, aware, emotionally rich children. She didn't regret walking away from Kaylin. Her sacrifices proved that she chose the right path. She didn't need a mansion to raise her twins. She didn't need a trust fund to teach them value. She gave them something richer, stability built through consistency. Wealth didn't build their home. Love did, and that love would later carry her into moments where her inner strength shined brighter than any luxury ever could. Darren Crest entered Saren's life in a way that felt natural, not forced. He walked into her office one afternoon with a folder tucked under his arm and a calm presence that softened the room. He didn't lead with status or ego. He didn't try to impress her. He simply asked if she had time to look at a problem his firm was struggling with. He had heard of Saren through quiet recommendations, professionals who admired her ability to fix complicated systems without turning the process into chaos. Darren respected skill, not noise, and Serena's reputation was built on steady competence. That alone drew him in. When he spoke, he didn't rush. His tone didn't fluctuate with pressure. His questions were thoughtful, not demanding. He explained the restructuring his company needed, acknowledging where mistakes had been made. Most executives came to Saren defensive and guarded. Darren came honest. That difference caught her attention. As they reviewed documents, he watched her work, not in a way that inspected or judged, but in a way that appreciated her concentration. When she asked for clarifications, he answered without hesitation. When she paused to think, he didn't fill the silence. He allowed her space to find clarity. That was new for Saren. People often pushed her to hurry. Darren didn't. Before he left, he said something simple yet impactful. "I trust good minds, and yours is one I hope to work with." Saren didn't feel overwhelmed by his presence. She felt steady around him. His energy didn't disrupt her balance. If anything, he aligned with it. Later that evening, when she returned home tired but content, she found Mira and Solon excitedly working on a drawing together. She smiled, realizing the day had lifted her in ways she didn't expect. Darren hadn't done anything grand, but he had offered respect, patience, and sincerity, qualities she had almost forgotten in adult interactions. She didn't know then how important his presence would become. She only knew he carried a calm that reminded her of stability she once believed she'd lost forever. Darren Crest wasn't a storm or a spark. He was simply a steady light entering her quiet world. Darren's confidence didn't come from money or reputation. It came from clarity, knowing who he was, what he valued, and what he refused to compromise. He didn't boast about accomplishments. People learned about them through others, not through him. He let his work speak. He let his consistency tell the story. Whenever he visited Saren's office, he remained composed. He greeted her with a nod, placed his materials neatly on the table, and focused on the task at hand. His presence didn't carry unnecessary noise. He didn't interrupt her thoughts. He didn't dominate discussions. He moved with purpose and stillness, a balanced combination that Saren found grounding. He carried himself like a man who understood life's pressures but refused to transfer them onto others. When problems arose, he didn't react with panic. He observed, assessed, and responded with reason. Even in tense meetings where his partners argued or pushed unrealistic deadlines, Darren held the room with his quiet authority. Saren admired how he communicated. He didn't speak to impress. He spoke to clarify. He didn't dismiss others. He listened before offering solutions. His leadership was the opposite of Kalen's aggressive drive. Where Kalen demanded control, Darren guided with steadiness. One afternoon, as they reviewed financial projections, Saren noticed how he leaned slightly forward. Hands folded, giving her his full attention whenever she explained a complex section. He didn't pretend to understand to save pride. If he needed further explanation, he asked without hesitation. This humility, paired with competence, was rare. The more Saren observed him, the more she understood why people trusted him. He didn't force alignment, he inspired it. His team followed him because they respected his character, not because they feared his position. And though Saren had no interest in hearing compliments, Darren offered them sincerely and sparingly. "You have a rare clarity," he told her once. "Your mind doesn't get lost in noise." These words didn't flatter her. They acknowledged her. That acknowledgement felt different from praise. It felt genuine. Darren didn't need to prove himself. His calm made space for others to breathe. And slowly, Saren found herself breathing easier around him. Darren stepped into Saren's life gently. He never attempted to fill roles that weren't his. When he realized she was a single mother, he didn't react with pity or assumptions. He didn't question her choices or the father's absence. Instead, he adjusted his interactions with respect for her responsibilities. One day, when she apologized for bringing the twins to the office after school, he waved the apology away lightly. "They belong wherever you are. I don't mind." His words weren't performative. He meant them. He learned the twins' names and greeted them when they came in. Mira took a liking to him slowly, observing him with cautious eyes before offering small smiles. Solon warmed quicker, showing him a project he built with popsicle sticks. Darren listened with genuine attention, commenting thoughtfully instead of offering empty praise. But he never crossed boundaries. He didn't try to parent. He didn't try to bond too quickly. He let relationships grow naturally. When Saren mentioned a financial strain once, unexpected school fees, combined with apartment repairs, Darren didn't rush to offer money. Instead, he adjusted her workload schedule to help her secure additional hours without overwhelming her. He trusted her ability to stand on her own and supported her in ways that respected her independence. His support showed up in small gestures as well, dropping off documents at her door when he knew she was tired, bringing warm tea during late-night work sessions without making a scene about it, reminding her to take breaks when she pushed herself too long. Darren understood that Saren valued stability more than grand gestures. She valued partnership, not rescue. She valued consistency, not control. So he moved in alignment with what she needed, not what he assumed she lacked. Saren noticed the difference. Kalen once tried to mold her into the person he needed beside him. Darren met her where she already stood. His presence didn't feel demanding. It felt reinforcing, like a quiet extension of the strength she already carried. For the first time in a long while, Saren didn't feel alone in her responsibilities. Not because Darren tried to take over, but because he stood beside her with respect. Boundaries were important to Saren. After everything with Kalen, she guarded her emotional space with care. She didn't share personal details quickly. She didn't reveal her fears, her exhaustion, or the parts of motherhood that weighed on her. She offered pieces of herself slowly, testing whether the person receiving them honored her trust. Darren noticed this early on and responded with patience. He didn't pry into her past. He didn't push for details she wasn't ready to give. When something about her expression hinted at worry, he waited for her to speak instead of asking invasive questions. If she needed space to think, he allowed it. If she declined invitations due to the twins, he adjusted. If she seemed tired, he shortened meetings without drawing attention to it. His respect wasn't conditional. It was consistent. He also paid attention to how she reacted around men with strong personalities. In group settings, if anyone grew too assertive, Saren's shoulders tensed slightly. Darren noticed these subtle shifts and sometimes stepped in, not by overpowering the situation, but by redirecting the tone, offering her ease without making it obvious. Once, after a particularly long day, Saren walked him to the elevator. He asked, "Do you need anything before I go?" She shook her head, offering a tired smile. He didn't linger. He didn't interpret her politeness as an invitation to stay longer. He simply nodded and said, "Rest well. Tomorrow doesn't need to be heavy." That line stayed with her. Darren respected her time, her silence, her limits, and her pace. He never treated her as fragile. He treated her as capable while still honoring her boundaries. This balanced respect was new for Saren. It felt like being seen without being exposed. Trust doesn't grow from loud promises. It grows from quiet consistency. And Darren delivered consistency without effort, without agenda. His presence made Saren feel something she hadn't felt in years, safe without being controlled. Even as Darren's presence brought steadiness into her life, Saren carried a quiet fear she didn't voice. Love had wounded her before, not through betrayal, but through abandonment disguised as ambition. Kaylin's choices taught her that attachment could turn into ache if she trusted the wrong person. So even while Darren supported her, even while he honored her boundaries, Saren guarded her heart. She appreciated his presence but didn't assume it meant permanence. She welcomed his help but didn't grow dependent. She accepted his kindness but stored caution beneath her gratitude. At night, after the twins fell asleep, she sometimes sat on the edge of her bed reflecting on the day. Darren's sincerity softened her, but softness frightened her. Opening the door to comfort meant risking loss again. She wasn't sure she was ready. She worried about letting someone close enough to hurt her. She worried about allowing the twins to bond with a man who might decide one day that her quiet life didn't fit his ambitions. She worried about stepping into something meaningful, only to repeat the pain she fought so hard to escape. But she also recognized the truth she didn't want to admit. Darren made her feel seen in ways that didn't overwhelm her. He made her feel valued without asking for anything in return. He made her feel that life didn't have to be a battle between independence and companionship. Still, the fear lingered, a silent reminder of wounds not fully healed. Yet beneath that fear lived a spark of hope. Not fireworks, not intensity, something gentler. A spark of safety. She wasn't falling for Darren. She was realizing she could stand near him without losing herself. And for a woman who had walked through heartbreak with quiet dignity, that realization was powerful. Saren didn't know where this new connection would lead, but she knew one thing clearly. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of being seen, only afraid of losing the peace she'd built. Darren didn't interrupt that peace. He strengthened it, and that was the beginning of something meaningful. The envelope arrived on a quiet Thursday morning, delivered by hand, placed gently on Saren's desk by a courier who spoke little but carried an expression of importance. Saren stared at it for a moment, unsure why something so small could stir such a shift in the air. The envelope was white and heavy, embossed with gold details along the edges. It didn't belong in her modest office. It looked out of place amongst stacks of files and well-worn notebooks. She ran her fingers lightly across the gold seal. The moment she touched it, she felt her pulse change. This wasn't a routine delivery. This wasn't a simple invitation to a work event. Something about the weight, the texture, and the crafted lettering hinted at a message designed to impress or provoke. When she opened it, the writing shimmered under the light. Davos International Legacy Gala, a celebration of innovation in the future. Her name followed in raised, elegant script. Saren Alden, honored guest. She inhaled slowly, setting the envelope down. She hadn't heard from Kaylin in years. Not one message, not one apology, not one attempt to understand the life he stepped out of. She never wanted gratitude from him, but she expected distance. So why now? Why this grand gesture? Her heart moved through emotions she didn't voice. Discomfort, confusion, and a faint tug of disbelief. The envelope wasn't an olive branch. It was a signal. Someone wanted her presence in a space she never thought she'd step into again. The gold lettering didn't hide the motive. It only masked it. She reread the card, then placed it face down as if to quiet the memories it triggered. The room around her stayed silent, but her thoughts ran with questions she wasn't ready to face. The past was calling, wrapped in gold, and she didn't know if she wanted to answer. But the envelope remained on her desk, refusing to be ignored. A single message wrapped in elegance. The world she once walked away from was opening its doors again. When Risa arrived after work that evening, Saren placed the envelope on the kitchen table. She didn't introduce it. She didn't explain. She simply waited. Risa lived with instincts sharpened by experience. She noticed details, shifts in tone, changes in posture. So when she spotted the envelope, she paused mid-step. "What's this?" Risa asked, picking it up carefully. "An invitation," Saren said, stirring the pot on the stove even though her appetite had faded. From Dravos International. Risa opened it, scanned the message, and exhaled sharply. Oh no. He wants something. Her voice didn't carry fear, it carried certainty. She knew Kaylin enough through Saren's absence of words. She knew ambition often came dressed as formality. She also knew Saren didn't need complications from a man who once treated her heart as optional. Risa placed the envelope down with a controlled motion. Saren, be careful. People like him don't reach out unless the room behind them is shaking. Saren didn't respond immediately. She kept her eyes on the simmering food, though her thoughts were caught somewhere else, caught between past wounds and current peace. Risa stepped closer, lowering her tone. You built a life without him, a good one. Don't let curiosity or guilt drag you back into something unfinished. The warning wasn't harsh, it was protective. Risa had stood beside Saren through every silent heartbreak, every night she fought, fatigue, every day she raised the twins with strength she never flaunted. She wasn't opposing the Gala, she was guarding Saren's heart. Saren nodded slowly. I know. Risa studied her more closely. Do you want to go? I don't know, Saren answered. Risa crossed her arms gently. Then think with clarity, not memory. Invitations don't always come with good intentions. Sometimes they try to pull you where you no longer belong. Saren breathed in deeply, acknowledging the truth in Risa's words. But a question lingered inside her. One she couldn't shake. The envelope had reopened a door she carefully closed, and the warning reminded her that stepping through it carried a cost. But she also sensed something else. This wasn't about going back. This was about deciding whether she still needed to hide. As Saren sat with the envelope later that night, she began to understand what Risa meant. The invitation wasn't personal, it was strategic. Over the past few months, news outlets hinted at tension within Dravos International. Investors questioned the leadership's direction. Articles suggested the company was losing its human touch, its sense of grounding, its ability to relate to the public. And Kaylin, once the board's prized asset, had become a symbol of what they feared: distance, rigidity, ambition without warmth. Saren knew these worlds well. She once watched him struggle under their expectations, watched him carry pressure built from someone else's blueprint. She remembered board members referring to her as quiet and not aligned with the image. She remembered how easily they dismissed her presence, not because she lacked value, but because she didn't match their plans. Now she understood why their tone changed. Saren represented something Kaylin needed to restore: authenticity, balance, humility. The board didn't want Saren because they missed her. They wanted her because she symbolized the part of Kaylin people trusted before he changed. Her presence softened his edges without effort. She reminded him to breathe. She reminded him to see people, not just outcomes. In their eyes, bringing Saren into the spotlight, even briefly, might show investors a narrative of stability and maturity, a sentimental story of reconnecting with his past, a portrait of leadership grounded in vulnerability. They didn't know the full truth. They didn't know the twins existed. They didn't know the cost of the silence Kaylin allowed. They only saw an opportunity. Saren leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She wasn't naive. She understood their motives. But she also understood something more important. Motives didn't always erase meaning. Her presence could shift narratives, not only theirs, but hers. If she stepped into that room, she would walk in with a life that stood on its own strength, not his. She wouldn't be a symbol of his redemption. She would be the proof of hers. The board wanted an image, but they didn't realize Saren had become far more than a reflection of their expectations. She was now a woman who defined her own. Saren spent the next day wrestling with a dilemma she didn't share with anyone. Part of her wanted nothing to do with the past. She had grown from those years, built a world with her twins, and found grounding in a rhythm that didn't revolve around status or approval. Attending the Gala felt like stepping backward into a space that didn't deserve her presence. But another part of her, small, quiet, but steady, wondered whether avoiding the event meant she still carried fear. She didn't crave confrontation. She didn't want drama. She didn't want recognition. She simply wanted to face the truth of who she had become. The envelope symbolized something she tried to keep buried, the version of herself that once waited for someone else's choices to determine her worth. She was no longer that woman. Yet standing in front of a mirror, looking at the way life had shaped her, she wondered if showing up meant reclaiming a chapter she never closed. She thought of Mira and Solon. She thought of the nights she tucked them in with a promise to give them a life filled with honesty and love. She thought of the strength it took to raise them without bitterness. She thought of the countless days she worked hard so they never felt lacking. Would avoiding the gala teach them confidence? Or would walking into that space teach them courage? Saren placed the envelope on the counter again. Her heart moved through discomfort, reflection, and resolve. It wasn't about Kaylin. It wasn't about the board. It wasn't even about the past. It was about the woman she was now, the mother she became, the strength she carried. She wasn't deciding whether to face him. She was deciding whether to show up for herself. Internal conflict isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet weighing of truths, the balancing of past and present. Saren wasn't looking for closure. She wasn't looking for validation. She wanted clarity. If she attended the gala, she wanted it to be for the right reason. Not anger, not pride, not revenge. She wanted to walk in as proof of her growth. But deciding that wasn't easy. Not when scars still lived beneath her calm. When Saren finally told Darren about the invitation, she expected a measured reaction. She didn't expect the look of understanding that crossed his face or the steady silence he offered while she explained her uncertainty. Darren didn't rush to fill the space. He listened fully, something rare in a world always ready to advise without hearing. When she finished, he rested his hands on the table, considering her with quiet focus. "This isn't about Kaylin," he said gently. "It's about you." Saren held his gaze. She appreciated that he never softened the truth to spare her feelings. "You're thinking of the past," he continued, "but the past isn't what defines the moment. You've built a life that stands on its own. You raised 2 children with strength. You've grown into someone who doesn't need anyone's permission to show up." He leaned forward slightly. "So if you walk into that room, walk in with the life you built, not the life you left." Those words landed deep. They didn't push her. They didn't shame her. They reminded her of her journey. Saren felt the weight of his sincerity, the respect behind his advice. He didn't tell her what choice to make. He gave her clarity for the choice she already held inside. Saren looked down, her fingers tracing the golden lettering on the envelope. "I'm not sure how they'll react," she admitted. "You're not responsible for their reactions," Darren replied. "You're responsible for your truth, and your truth is strong." His presence didn't overwhelm her. It steadied her. He didn't claim to protect her. He encouraged her to recognize her own power. "And if you go," he added softly, "don't go to prove anything to him. Go to honor what you've become." Saren breathed out slowly, feeling a calm rise within her. Darren wasn't pushing her toward a decision. He was reminding her she wasn't standing alone. She had a life worth showing. She had a story worth carrying into any room. And for the first time since the envelope arrived, she felt ready to choose. That evening, Saren stood at the window while the twins played on the floor behind her. The city lights flickered softly outside, scattered across the skyline. She held the invitation in her hand, turning it over slowly, examining each detail with the calm focus she applied to every important decision. She thought of the years she carried silence. She thought of the sacrifices she made. She thought of Mira and Solon's laughter echoing through the home she built. The envelope didn't represent Kaylin anymore. It represented a moment where she could step forward without apology. She placed it gently on the table, feeling the final shift in her chest. The hesitation loosened. The fear softened. The decision settled with clarity she didn't force. She would go, not to revisit him, not to reopen anything, not to prove her worth. She would go to stand in her truth, with dignity, with grace, with the story of her life reflected in the children who followed her into the world. Risa looked at her from the couch, raising a brow. "So," Saren exhaled. "I'll attend." The twins looked up curiously, unaware of the significance of her words. Saren didn't smile. She didn't tremble. She simply felt steady. A woman returning to a space that once saw her as small, now standing tall with the life she built. She agreed to show up. But the world she was stepping into had no idea who she had become. Darren Crest wasn't the type of man who flaunted influence, but he possessed relationships built through years of sincerity and silent contribution. His name carried weight in circles that valued integrity more than show. When Saren finally agreed to attend the gala, Darren made a single phone call, not to boast, not to elevate himself, but to ensure she entered that world protected and respected. The aerospace company he contacted held global acclaim. They built specialized aircraft for long-distance scientific missions, humanitarian operations, and high-level diplomatic travel. Their flagship jet, valued at over $700 million, represented both engineering mastery and refined luxury. Access to it wasn't purchased. It was granted. Only a handful of people in the world received such courtesy. And Darren was one of them. Years earlier, he had privately funded an initiative that expanded STEM education for underserved communities. The aerospace company partnered with him, deeply grateful for his ongoing support. He never publicized his involvement. He didn't need applause. His intention was simple: give opportunities to children who deserved them. When Darren explained Seren's situation, without sharing personal details, without framing her as fragile or in need, they listened closely. He spoke of her resilience, her character, the life she built with 2 children, and the importance of her walking into the gala with strength rather than intimidation. Their response came swiftly: the jet is hers for the evening. Darren thanked them with the same soft humility he carried everywhere. He didn't tell Seren until everything was finalized. When he finally did, she looked at him with widened eyes. She wasn't used to having doors opened for her, not because of pity, but because someone respected her enough to create space. "Darren, this is too much," she whispered. "No," he replied gently. "This is alignment." He didn't offer the jet to impress her. He offered it to honor her. He knew the gala wasn't a small moment. He understood the symbolism. He believed she deserved an entrance that matched the magnitude of her journey. Seren stood quietly, absorbing his sincerity. She felt something shift, not in the world around her, but in her understanding of what genuine support looked like. This wasn't a grand gesture meant to overshadow her story. This was someone standing beside her, so she could stand taller. The offer stunned Seren in ways words couldn't capture. She had lived years grounded in simplicity, building stability through routine and quiet choices. A $700 million jet didn't fit anywhere into that picture. It felt extravagant, almost unreal, like stepping into a life she never sought or desired. She spent the night pacing softly around her living room after Darren left. Mira and Solon had fallen asleep early, exhausted from a playful day. Their gentle breathing reminded her of the life she built with her own hands, steady, grounded, honest. A jet of that magnitude belonged to leaders, dignitaries, innovators with global influence, not a woman who stitched her life together through patience. She worried about stepping into something that looked like luxury when her intentions weren't rooted in spectacle. She didn't want to be misunderstood. She didn't want the attention. Most of all, she didn't want her children exposed to unnecessary noise. Seren sat at the edge of her bed and pressed her hands together. What if attending the gala with such an entrance made her seem arrogant? What if the world judged her before they understood her story? What if this move overshadowed her true purpose, showing up with dignity, not triumph? But beneath the hesitation lived a deeper question. Was she afraid of the world's opinion, or was she afraid of seeing herself rise above the version of her the past tried to define? The truth settled slowly. She wasn't afraid of the jet. She was afraid of accepting a life where she no longer minimized herself. Darren hadn't offered excess. He offered respect. He gave her a way to enter the room without shrinking, a way to protect her twins from the chaos of paparazzi, a way to show Kaylin's world that she didn't return as a shadow. Seren closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Her hesitation wasn't a sign to decline. It was a reminder that stepping into power can feel uncomfortable for those who learn to survive in silence. By morning, her mind was clearer. She still carried traces of uncertainty, but she knew what decision would honor her growth. She would go, and she would go with grace. When Seren told the twins about the trip, she expected questions. She expected hesitation. Instead, she received pure joy, the type only children could offer without measure. "A jet?" Solon asked, eyes widening with wonder. "A real one? Not the ones in books?" "Yes," Seren answered softly. "A real one." Mira pressed a hand against her chest, her voice lifting with curiosity. "Will we see stars from up high?" "Maybe," Seren replied, smiling at the innocence in her daughter's eyes. The twins asked nothing about the gala. They asked nothing about the people who would be there. Their world wasn't shaped by society's expectations. It was shaped by the simple awe of an adventure with their mother. They spent the entire afternoon planning what to pack. Mira folded her favorite sweater with careful precision, while Solon attempted to bring 3 unnecessary toys until Risa stepped in, laughing. "Pick one, young man. The sky won't run out of space, but the jet might." Their excitement softened the heaviness Saren carried. Watching them move around the apartment reminded her why she made her choices years ago. She didn't leave for pride. She left to raise 2 children in a world not built on pressure. When Saren showed them the small outfits they would wear to the gala, Mira beamed. "Will there be lights, Mama?" "Yes," Saren whispered, "but we will stay close." Solon held Saren's hand tightly. "Do we have to talk to strangers?" "No," she assured him. "You only talk if you want to." Their trust held more meaning than any applause she would ever receive. The world had once dismissed her, but her children didn't. They saw her as home, as safety, as certainty. That evening, Mira climbed onto Saren's lap. "Mama." "Yes, love? Do you feel happy about the trip?" Saren paused, then kissed her forehead. "I feel ready." The twins didn't care about Kaylin's world. They cared about windows that showed clouds and stars. Their excitement wasn't loud, it was pure. Their joy reminded Saren that this moment wasn't about glamour. It was about stepping into a new chapter with the 2 hearts she valued most. The private terminal glowed softly under the early evening sky as Saren arrived with the twins. Darren stood near the entrance, dressed in a dark coat, radiating the same steady presence that had guided her through this decision. When he saw them approach, his expression warmed, not with pride, but with sincere acknowledgement. "You look ready," he said quietly. Saren nodded. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit, chosen not to impress, but to reflect her inner clarity. Mira held her hand, while Solon clung to the strap of her bag, eyes widened at the sight of the massive aircraft waiting for them. The jet stood like a silver monument against the fading light, sleek and refined. Even Saren, who tried to moderate her reaction, felt a sense of awe. It wasn't luxury that impressed her. It was the precision, the craftsmanship, the purpose. A staff member approached with a respectful smile. "Miss Alden, welcome. We're prepared for your flight." Hearing her last name spoken with such regard startled her in a way she didn't expect. She wasn't used to being addressed with formality, yet it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt earned. As they walked toward the jet, Mira squeezed Saren's hand. "Mama, it looks like the ones in movies." Solon tugged gently. "Is it okay if we go inside now?" "Yes," Saren answered, her voice soft but certain. "Let's go in together." Darren stepped aside slightly, letting Saren lead. He didn't overshadow the moment. He allowed her to take the first step. Inside, the jet's interior greeted them with calm lighting, wide seating, and soft textures. It didn't feel extravagant. It felt intentional, designed for long journeys where comfort mattered more than display. The twins gasped softly, wandering only a few steps before stopping to look out the large windows. Saren placed her bag down and took in the scene. Her children mesmerized Darren. Watching quietly, the cabin reflecting a life she never dared to imagine. For the first time, she wasn't intimidated by her surroundings. She wasn't shrinking. She was present. The moment she sat down, the door closed gently behind them, sealing a chapter of hesitation and beginning a journey toward a new kind of strength. As the jet lifted from the runway, Saren felt a calm settle over her that surprised even herself. She expected nerves, tension, maybe even regret. Instead, she felt centered. The hum of the engines created a steady backdrop, almost like a heartbeat guiding them through the sky. Mira pressed her forehead to the window. "Mama, we're above the clouds." Solon climbed onto the seat beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "It looks like cotton." Saren watched them with a quiet smile, letting their wonder wash away any remaining doubts. This wasn't extravagance, it was experience. A moment of peace she never imagined sharing with her children. Darren sat across from them, hands folded, gaze soft but observant. He didn't interrupt. He let Saren and the twins absorb every detail at their own pace. Occasionally he glanced at Saren, as if checking whether she felt comfortable. She answered with small nods, reassured by his presence. Midway through the flight, the lights dimmed to a warm glow. A staff member brought warm tea for Saren and juice for the twins. Saren accepted it gently, still adjusting to being served rather than serving. Mira and Solon settled beside her, leaning against her shoulders with contentment. The cabin didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like a sanctuary suspended in the sky. Saren used the moment to reflect, not on Kaylin, but on the journey that brought her here. The struggle she endured, the choices she made, the sacrifices that shaped her. She realized she wasn't flying toward confrontation. She was flying toward closure. The peacefulness of the flight mirrored the inner stability she spent years building. For once, the world wasn't pulling at her. She wasn't running. She wasn't bracing for loss. She was moving toward a future she could choose on her terms. When the pilot's voice eventually spoke over the intercom, Saren straightened. "We'll land shortly." Darren met her eyes. He didn't say anything, but she understood. The real moment was waiting on the ground, but the strength she needed for it was already in her hands. As the jet descended, the city lights below came into view, scattered across the landscape like tiny embers. Saren felt her heartbeat steady rather than race. She wasn't walking into the past. She was stepping into a space she once fled, but this time with her head lifted. The jet touched down smoothly, gliding across the runway. When it slowed, the twins leaned forward, eager to see what waited outside. Saren gathered their small bags and held Mira's hand while Solon stood close on her other side. As the cabin door opened, a burst of cool air entered, carrying distant murmurs and flashes of movement. Reporters were nearby, expecting a delegation from another nation, an arrival scheduled around the same time. They weren't prepared for Saren. When the stairway lowered, the first few cameras swung casually in curiosity. But the moment Saren appeared at the top, holding Mira's hand with Solon at her side, attention snapped toward them. Whispers floated through the crowd. Who is she? Is that the special jet? Are those her children? Saren didn't rush. She didn't shrink. She walked with calm steps, guiding the twins carefully down the stairs. Their presence beside her shifted the energy instantly. This wasn't a celebrity entrance or a statement of wealth. It was a woman arriving with dignity, grounded in the life she built. Cameras flashed more rapidly now. Reporters leaned forward. Someone gasped softly when they recognized her. Saren Alden. Is she connected to Dravos International? People weren't staring at luxury. They were staring at a quiet power they didn't expect. Darren stepped out behind them, ensuring they moved safely through the small crowd, but he remained a shadow, letting Saren take her moment without overshadowing her presence. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, Saren paused for a brief second. Not for the cameras, not for the crowd, for herself. She had once been dismissed, overlooked, pushed aside without care. But tonight, she stepped from a $700 million jet not to impress, but to show that the life she built stood strong, whole, and worthy of every step she took. The world didn't know her story, but they felt her presence. The power no longer belonged to the past. It belonged to her. The Gala sat beneath towering glass beams, glowing with warm gold light that spilled across the entrance. Saren stepped from the car with Mira and Solon at her sides. The evening air carried a hush of luxury, softened by music flowing from inside. Guests paused as she approached. They didn't know her name yet, but something about her presence drew awareness. She wasn't dressed to compete. She wore calm confidence like a second skin. The twins held her hands without hesitation. They sensed her steadiness and followed her rhythm. Saren's posture remained centered, even as the marble floor beneath her gleamed with extravagant detail. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't intimidated. She walked like a woman entering a place that once dismissed her, but no longer defined her. Inside, the ballroom stretched in all directions, glowing with crystal arrangements that sparkled under soft lighting. People gathered in clusters, murmuring about business successes and future investments. Saren's entrance shifted the tone. Guests turned. Whispers rose subtly. Who is she? She came from that jet. Is she connected to Kalen? Saren didn't flinch. Her pace stayed even. She held Mira's hand securely while Solon scanned the room with wide eyes, absorbing everything silently. The children brought warmth into a space known for formality. Their presence didn't break the atmosphere, it softened it. She followed the path toward the main hall, aware that cameras were, picking up her arrival, aware that unfamiliar eyes followed her. But none of this rattled her. Her focus stayed on the steady breath she carried, the years of growth that shaped her, the life she brought with her. One step after another, she walked into the room not as a symbol, not as a memory, but as a woman who survived heartbreak and rebuilt her peace. She knew he was somewhere beyond the golden lights. She knew their paths would cross within moments. But she didn't rush. She entered the Gala the same way she built her life, with patience, intention, and quiet strength. The world watched, but she didn't shrink under its gaze. She belonged to her journey, not the room. Kalen stood near the stage speaking with two board members when the air shifted. He didn't notice at first. He was mid-sentence, nodding at something one of them said. But then the board member's eyes flicked over his shoulder and widened slightly. Another man whispered, "Who is that?" The tone wasn't casual. It carried a mix of awe and confusion. Kalen turned. His breath caught instantly. Across the room, illuminated by the golden glow of chandeliers, stood Saren, the woman he once held close, the woman he pushed aside in the name of ambition, the woman he convinced himself he'd forget. Her presence hit him with a force he didn't anticipate. She hadn't come in dramatic fashion. She entered with quiet composure, and somehow that made her stand out more. He felt the floor shift beneath his expectations. He never imagined she would show up, especially not like this. He thought she lived far away from anything connected to him. He assumed she stayed in the shadows he left her in. Seeing her now, standing tall and steady, broke through every story he told himself about how she survived without him. She looked different, not in appearance but in spirit. There was confidence in her posture, certainty in her steps, and a calm he once relied on but never deserved. She didn't glance his way. She didn't seek his gaze. She simply existed in the room with dignity that demanded acknowledgement. Kalen felt the past collide with the present in one painful instant. The version of Saren he remembered was gentle, soft-spoken, patient. The woman in front of him carried all of that still, but with strength sharpened by years he didn't witness. He took one hesitant step forward, unable to stop himself. His chest tightened. His thoughts scattered. He had prepared for many outcomes tonight: investor questions, board, expectations, media presence, but nothing prepared him for Saren. He didn't feel the room watching him. He didn't hear the music anymore. All he saw was her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of everything he lost without realizing it. Kalen regained his breath long enough to take another step, but before he reached Saren, his eyes dropped to the two children standing beside her, a boy and a girl, dark hair, steady expressions, both with features that mirrored the same familiar lines he saw in his own reflection every morning. His steps stopped. His world stopped. His heartbeat stumbled painfully as recognition cut through him. He looked at the boy first, Solon, whose eyes carried a depth that reminded him of the questions he once held about the world. Then he looked at Mira, who stood gracefully with a quiet composure that mirrored Saren's calm certainty. The resemblance was undeniable, not imagined, not subtle, undeniable. He whispered, barely audible, "My God." He hadn't prepared for this. He'd never considered this possibility. The idea that Saren could have been carrying a child, let alone two, never crossed his mind. He told himself she moved on easily. He told himself she left because she wasn't ready for his world. He told himself stories that preserved his pride. Now those stories shattered in one silent moment. Pieces of regret pressed into his chest. His throat tightened. His eyes flickered between Saren and the twins, searching for an explanation that wasn't cruel. But every detail lined up with the truth he could no longer deny. They were his children, his twins. He felt the weight of years he missed. First steps, first words, birthdays, late-night fevers, laughter, tears. He saw not only what he lost, but what they lost. A father who wasn't there because he didn't listen when it mattered. He walked forward slowly, unable to hide the shock in his expression. Saren turned toward him finally, her gaze calm but unreadable. The twins held her hands tighter, unsure of him. Mira stepped slightly closer to Saren. Solon watched with quiet caution. Kalen swallowed, struggling to speak. The truth was no longer hidden. It stood at her side, and he was the only one who didn't know. Kalen stopped a few steps from Saren, his breath uneven, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and desperation. He wanted to reach for words, but guilt twisted each one before it formed. Saren watched him quietly, offering no rescue from the silence. She didn't look angry. She didn't look shaken. She looked settled in the life she built. Saren. He finally managed, his voice low. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her expression remained composed, but her eyes held a tired wisdom that came from years of carrying truth alone. She didn't rush to answer. She let him feel the weight of his own question. "I tried," she said softly, and the simplicity of her words cut deeper than any accusation. Kalen blinked, stunned. "When?" "Twice. Once, by call your assistant screened. The second time you told me we would talk after the quarter ended. Then you walked away." He felt those words hit like a physical blow. He remembered that moment vaguely. A hallway, cameras nearby, board members waiting. He remembered brushing her off, convincing himself he wasn't rejecting her, just postponing. He didn't realize the cost of that postponement. He didn't realize she stood there with a truth that would reshape his entire life. "I never knew," he said weakly. Sarah nodded. "Because you didn't listen." He opened his mouth to explain, to blame the pressure, the board, the expectations, the noise around him. But when he looked at the twins, all those excuses sounded hollow. Mira looked away, uncertain. Solon clung to Saren's leg, sensing tension. "You should have pushed through," he whispered, almost pleading with himself more than her. Saren shook her head gently. "It wasn't my job to force you to care." The words weren't sharp. They were honest. Kalen felt his chest tighten again. He wanted to reach out, to kneel, to apologize, but the weight of the moment locked him in place. The years he missed stretched out in front of him like a heavy shadow. He felt the consequences of his silence settling into his bones. He had abandoned something he never even gave himself the chance to know. And it wasn't anger Saren showed him. It was truth. By now, the room had fallen into a quiet ripple of whispers. Board members stared. Investors shifted. Photographers paused, sensing a moment they weren't sure they should capture. The air wasn't loud, but it carried tension shaped by recognition. Kalen stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Saren, if I had known." She held up a hand gently, stopping him without aggression. Her tone remained even. "If you had listened, you would have known." Those words echoed cleanly across the space. Not shouted, not dramatic, but they landed with the clarity of truth that couldn't be softened. The crowd felt it. Some guests exchanged glances, realizing the depth of the story unfolding in front of them. Others widened their eyes as pieces clicked together, the resemblance between the children, the timing of Saren's disappearance years ago, the sudden invitation. It wasn't a scandal. It was a revelation. The moral weight of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Saren didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't accuse. She simply revealed the consequence of his choices through a single sentence that told the entire story. Kalen's shoulders lowered. His face shifted from shock to something deeper, recognition mixed with regret. His eyes glistened with an ache he hadn't felt in years. Mira held Saren's hand tighter. Solon tugged at her sleeve, wanting reassurance. Saren leaned down slightly, whispering to them softly. The twins nodded, trusting her calm completely. People in the room watched Saren with newfound respect. She wasn't the fragile woman many expected her to be. She walked in with grace, stood firm in truth, and didn't let pain turn her bitter. Her presence outshone the gold in the room. Kalen swallowed hard. "Can we talk privately, please?" Saren shook her head gently. "Not tonight." The crowd didn't cheer or gasp. They absorbed. Sometimes silence holds more power than noise. And tonight, that silence belonged to Saren. Kalen remained standing there long after Saren turned away. He watched her walk toward the exit with the twins, their small hands holding hers, forming a picture of the life he never touched. Each step she took pressed deeper into the truth he spent years avoiding. He had not only lost her, he had lost the chance to be present for the children who carried part of him. Pain tightened in his chest as realization sank in. He saw every smile he missed, every birthday, every tear, every milestone. They lived without him because he didn't make space for them. Saren didn't shut him out. He shut himself out by choosing noise over presence. He looked at the board members nearby, their faces uneasy. They saw the fallout of their decisions too, the pressure they encouraged, the priorities they shaped. But none of them carried the personal consequence. Only Kalen did. The weight sat heavy inside him, settling like a truth he could no longer outrun. For the first time in his life, Kalen Dravos didn't care about reputation, optics, or investor reactions. He cared about the look in Saren's eyes when she told him the truth. He cared about the children who didn't recognize him as anything more than a stranger. He cared about the years that slipped from his hands because he didn't pause long enough to listen. Saren didn't seek revenge. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't demand anything. She simply revealed what silence costs. As she reached the exit, Kalen took one step forward but stopped himself. He realized that rushing after her wouldn't change what she lived through. It wouldn't rewrite the years. It wouldn't mend trust. The truth broke something inside him, not for drama, but for accountability. He finally understood that apologies mean nothing when they arrive years too late. Viewers, have you ever missed something important because you didn't listen when it mattered? Have you ever lost a chance because silence felt easier than honesty? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice may help someone recognize their moment before it slips away. The moment Saren turned from Kaylin, the entire ballroom felt it. Not because she made a spectacle, not because she raised her voice or demanded anything. The shift came from her calm exit, the kind that says a chapter is finished, not burned. Her steps were sure, measured, and quiet, almost gentle in their finality. She wasn't running. She wasn't shaken. She carried the weight of her choice without hesitation. Years ago, she would have waited for him to understand her. She would have paused and hoped he would meet her halfway. But tonight, she saw what life had taught her. Pain wasn't her teacher anymore. Peace was. The space she needed wouldn't come from demanding anything from him. It would come from walking away without leaving pieces of herself behind. The gold lights glowed on her dress as she stepped through the doorway. Soft music continued around her. Guests parted to let her pass, not out of fear but respect. Her silence was stronger than any confrontation could have been. Saren didn't look back because she didn't need to. Her story with Kaylin existed in a closed space now. She already lived through it, healed through it, and outgrew the version of herself who waited for him to see her worth. She didn't walk away to punish him. She walked away because she wasn't the same woman who once stood in his shadow. Her choice wasn't fueled by anger. It was grounded in acceptance. Acceptance that love without presence dissolves. Acceptance that commitment can't survive on promises alone. And acceptance that sometimes the strongest step is the one taken toward the life you built with your own hands. The exit doors opened slowly as she approached, letting in a calmer air from outside. She inhaled deeply, feeling her heart clear from the tension of the ballroom. Her stride stayed steady, her shoulders relaxed. The world behind her faded into background noise. This was freedom, not dramatic, not forced, simple, earned, and for the first time in a long while, her steps didn't carry regret, only direction. As Saren exited the ballroom, Mira and Solon kept close to her sides. Their hands remained linked with hers, their trust evident in the quiet way they followed her lead. The twins sensed the tension earlier, sensed the shift in energy around the man who looked at them with stunned eyes, but they didn't draw closer to him. They didn't reach for him. They didn't even question him. To them, he wasn't a figure missing from their lives. He was a stranger who stared at them with surprise. Children carry simple truths. They cling to the person who stayed, not the one who appeared suddenly. Their loyalty rested with the mother who tucked them into bed, soothed their fears, and celebrated their small victories. Mira squeezed Saren's hand as they walked. "Are we leaving now?" she asked softly. Saren nodded. "Yes, love." Solon looked back once, not with interest, but with a child's brief curiosity. He didn't feel drawn toward Kaylin. He didn't recognize the man's silent ache or the history between him and Saren. To him, the gala was overwhelming, bright and filled with unfamiliar faces. His mother was the constant point he relied on. Inside the ballroom, Kaylin watched the twins' decision unfold in real time. Their instinctive choice cut deeper than words. Children see truth first. They gravitate toward safety, toward stability, toward the person who nurtured them without wavering. He wasn't angry at them. He wasn't confused. He understood instantly. Their distance reflected the years he wasn't present, the moments he didn't even know he missed. They weren't rejecting him. They were simply choosing the world they trusted. Saren didn't rush them. She didn't try to hide their reactions or soften the truth. She let them decide naturally, without interference. Their steps synchronized with hers, matching her calm rhythm as they moved toward the elevator. Mira leaned her head against Saren's arm. Solon slid his palm further into hers. They didn't look like children torn between two adults. They looked like children at peace beside the only parent they had ever known. That simple truth painted the clearest picture of all. Kaylin stood frozen, watching the three of them disappear toward the exit. The people around him faded into a blur. Conversations drifted into nothing. The room's glow dimmed beneath the weight of what he understood too late. He didn't lose Saren tonight. He lost her years ago. He lost the chance to be a father before he even knew he was one. The realization hit him in waves. He saw flashes of what could have been. Birthday candles, school mornings, quiet afternoons with puzzles spread across the table. He saw Mira's gentle spirit, Solon's reserved nature, their shared features that mirrored pieces of himself. He imagined their first steps, their first words, moments he didn't know existed. All gone. Not stolen, not hidden, just missed. He remembered the day Saren tried to speak to him after a board meeting. He remembered brushing her off with the same casual confidence he used to navigate pressure. He remembered walking away without understanding that she needed him not as a CEO, not as a partner in ambition, but as the man who once held her heart gently. He felt every consequence he never anticipated, every missed call, every unanswered moment, every silence he allowed to grow. Kaylin wasn't angry at her. He wasn't even angry at himself in the way he expected. The feeling was different. He was grieving a life that never took shape because he didn't pause long enough to see what mattered. His breath trembled. He ran a hand over his face, trying to steady himself. The board members nearby murmured quietly, unsure whether to approach him or stay back. They had pushed him to prioritize the company's image, but not one of them carried the personal cost of those decisions. Only he did. He stared at the doorway where Saren disappeared. He had everything: wealth, influence, prestige, but none of it filled the space of what he lost. For the first time in his adult life, he felt small, because love doesn't wait for convenience, and now he understood the price of delay. Just as Saren reached the outer hall, a steady figure stepped forward from a quiet corner. Darren Crest had remained unseen inside the gala, giving her space to face what she needed to face. He didn't enter the ballroom. He didn't interfere. His presence wasn't a shield, it was a reminder of choice. When Saren saw him, her shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't inside the room. Darren wasn't a replacement for anything. He wasn't a man stepping in to claim a role. He was someone who understood boundaries, someone who offered support without conditions. "You did well," he said softly, his tone respectful. Saren nodded, feeling the emotional weight settle but not overwhelm her. "It wasn't about winning anything," she replied. "I know," Darren said. "You walked in with truth. You walked out with peace." He stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. The twins looked up at him with familiarity and ease. Mira gave a small smile. Solon stayed close to Saren, but without fear. Darren had earned their comfort over time, through gentle consistency. Inside the ballroom, Kaylin finally saw Darren. The sight of him stirred another ache, an ache not born from jealousy, but realization. This was the kind of man Saren stood beside now. Someone who didn't rush her. Someone who respected her strength. Someone who showed up steadily, not loudly. Darren didn't look at Kaylin with triumph. He didn't look with challenge. He offered a brief nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not rivalry. Kaylin felt the message clearly. Peace grows where presence exists. Saren turned toward the exit again. Darren walked at her pace, not leading, not following, matching her stride exactly. The twins moved naturally between them, secure in the environment Saren built. As they approached the outer lobby, Darren paused. "You ready to go?" Saren looked back once, not to see if Kaylin chased her, but to recognize the chapter she had finally closed. "Yes," she breathed. And with that, they stepped into the night with calm that belonged entirely to them. Outside the venue, the air was cool and soothing. Saren let the fresh breeze wash over her, grounding her after the intensity of the ballroom. She didn't feel shaken by the encounter. She didn't feel regret. She felt clarity, the kind that comes when truth isn't fought but accepted. Peace wasn't something she stumbled into. It was something she chose deliberately, moment by moment over the last several years. Tonight was simply a reflection of that journey, a final test of whether her heart still carried weight from the past. It didn't. Mira tugged her gently. "Mama, can we go home now?" "Yes," she answered with a soft smile. Solon leaned closer. "I didn't like the big room." "I know," she said. "We won't stay long places like that." Saren didn't judge herself for the life she once imagined with Kaylin. She didn't judge him for being unready. She simply recognized the truth she needed to live by. Peace grows when you stop chasing what doesn't nourish you. Darren stepped near, offering support without overshadowing her decisions. "You handled tonight with strength," he said. "Not many people carry themselves the way you did." Saren appreciated the words, not as praise, but as acknowledgement. She didn't need validation, but she valued being seen clearly. "It was time," she said quietly. She breathed deeply, feeling something release inside her. Not anger, not pain. Space. Her heart had room now, room for new experiences, room for gentler love, room for a future shaped by intention rather than survival. She knew Kalen would need time to face his truth. She wished him healing, not because she wanted him back, but because pain left unattended grows into harm. But his journey was no longer tied to hers. Saren walked forward with her children by her side, leaving behind the noise, stepping into the life she built with patience and quiet strength. The car dropped them at the private terminal, where the soft lights guided them toward the waiting jet. The same sleek aircraft that brought them earlier now felt like a bridge to the peace waiting for them back home. The twins' eyes brightened at the familiar sight. "Mama, are we flying again?" Mira asked. Saren nodded. "Yes. We're heading home." The steps extended gently, and the attendants greeted them with warm respect. Saren didn't flaunt anything about this travel. She held the children's hands as they climbed the steps at a steady pace. Darren followed behind, maintaining respectful distance. Inside, the cabin glowed softly. It didn't feel extravagant. It felt calm. Saren settled the twins into their seats, adjusting blankets and smoothing their hair. Mira leaned against her shoulder. Solon held her arm quietly. They were tired from the long evening, but safe in the certainty of her presence. Darren moved forward and took his seat across from them. He didn't intrude. He simply existed in a way that made the space feel balanced. Outside, the engines warmed. The night sky stretched across the runway, giving the moment a quiet ending not defined by drama. Saren gazed out the window, watching the terminal lights shimmer across the glass. The jet moved slowly, lifting steadily into the sky. Gravity softened its hold. The city lights faded below them. Saren felt relief, not because they were leaving Kalen behind, but because she followed her truth without compromise. She didn't fear what came next. She didn't need promises from anyone. She had the life she built, a peaceful home, 2 children who trusted her deeply. In a future that no longer carried the weight of unfinished chapters, as the plane ascended, Mira drifted asleep. Solon followed moments later. Saren rested her head back, feeling calm settle through her. This wasn't escape. It was closure, and the beginning of something gentler. As the plane leveled in the sky, Saren looked ahead, emotionally, not physically. The future didn't feel uncertain. It felt open, wide enough for hope, steady enough for growth. She didn't know exactly where the path would lead, but she trusted her steps now more than ever. She glanced at the twins, asleep with peaceful expressions. Their futures stretched forward in ways she once couldn't imagine. They would grow knowing love that wasn't shaped by longing or absence. They would grow seeing a mother who chose dignity, not desperation. Darren watched Saren quietly, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "You seem lighter," he said gently. "I am," she replied. "You deserve that." She smiled softly. She didn't need to label anything between them. She didn't need to rush into defining their connection. What mattered was this moment, his steady presence, her peace, and the knowledge that love doesn't need urgency to be real. It grows where trust has room. She thought briefly of Kalen, not with bitterness, but with acceptance. He had his journey. He would face his truth. She hoped he would grow from it, not sink under its weight, but he wasn't part of her next chapter. Saren's next chapter belonged to her children, to her healing, and to possibilities she once didn't believe she deserved. She rested her hand gently on Mira's blanket, then Solon's shoulder. They were her anchor and her freedom at the same time. Darren closed his eyes for a moment, letting the calm fill the cabin. There was no pressure for anything more. There was no chase. He understood that real closeness builds slowly. Saren leaned back, breathing evenly. Her story wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. It was defined by resilience, by patience, by love that grew quietly but deeply. And the sky outside reflected that truth, wide, steady, waiting. As the jet continued home, Saren reflected on what the journey had taught her. Not about love alone, but about herself. She learned that patience isn't weakness. It's awareness. It's trusting your pace even when the world pushes faster. It's choosing peace over panic. It's knowing that walking away doesn't mean losing. Sometimes it means finally stepping into your real strength. The lesson wasn't about punishing someone who failed her. It was about honoring herself enough to stop shrinking to fit someone else's noise. Pride had ruled Kalen's decisions. Fear had shaped his silence. And love, real, steady, grounded love, requires presence, not excuses. Saren didn't win tonight. She didn't compete. She simply lived by the truth she grew into, and that truth, freed her. The lights in the cabin dimmed gently. The twins slept soundly. Darren rested with calm certainty. Saren closed her eyes, feeling gratitude for the life she reclaimed through courage and quiet strength. She didn't fear the future. She welcomed it. Because peace isn't the reward of perfect choices. It's the reward of choosing yourself with intention. If this story touched you, subscribe for more narratives that teach strength, dignity, and love. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps build a community where healing and hope matter.